According to Fromm, any kind of transformation, economic, social, personal, organizational, requires that the cognitive, emotional, and imaginative powers be strengthened in many people, because only they have a transformative power that does not make people dependent again. Of an authoritarian orientation, Fromm speaks when the state of being related to others, to oneself, to nature, to work, and so on, is a result of an active, sadistic exercise of dominance and the passive, masochistic exercise of submissiveness, and the dominant and the submissive are symbiotically related to each other. The active, the sadistic, domination exercising part of this character tries to make and keep others submissive and dependent, to patronize, exploit, or even to torture. If the active part is directed against oneself, then authoritarians show a high degree of self-control, of self-discipline, of guilty feelings. They suffer from a rigid superego, which forbids everything pleasurable and frivolous. Typical of the passive, the masochistic part of the authoritarian character are submissiveness, under and blind obedience to authority, and idealization of it. Everything that is good is expected from the authority. In dealing with oneself, the masochistic striving expresses itself in a renunciation of everything self-willed, self-confident, of one's own rights and wishes, and of all expressions of autonomy. The selfless is the ideal of the passive authoritarian. A central feature of Fromm's understanding of authoritarianism is also that the person exercises authority and the submissive person are symbiotically connected. That is, they are dependent on each other. The symbiosis is related to the psychodynamics of the authoritarian character, which Fromm explains as follows. The submissive person, under pressure from the ruler, projects his own autonomous powers onto the authority, so that the latter has them at his disposal. However, since the submissive is symbiotically connected with the authority, he can secondarily participate in his own powers projected onto the authority. In this way, the person exercising dominance and the submissive person are existentially related to each other, and a strong emotional bond is created. Which impediments to the biophilic growth tendency accompany the authoritarian social character then? Let us first ask about the strivings that are strengthened and the values that are emphasized. The desired personality profile of a dominant authoritarian social character orientation includes, above all, that one submits to the circumstances and is submissive without asking for the purpose and the justification. Loyalty plays a very important role in all relationships and is often only attainable by faithfully bowing to circumstances. Obedience is a central value in authoritarian education, which is learned through castigation. Disobedience is the worst sin. The extinction of one's own will and any kind of self-will must also be learned early on in order to become a loyal and devoted employee or civil servant. The person in the service of an authority is characterized by selflessness. He or she knows no demands of his or her own, and is always there for the company, family, organization, sacrificing his or her own will and happiness to them and for them. Reliability and a sense of duty are two further values and character traits which, however, are an expression of submissiveness in an authoritarian orientation and for which one is not responsible. A last must of the authoritarian character, which should be mentioned here, is the feeling of dependence on the part of the submissive person and the feeling of arbitrary freedom on the part of the person exercising dominance. Let us now ask, which psychic growth powers have to be repressed in the case of an authoritarian character? In this way, the objective and objects of empowerment for transformation processes with which in an authoritarian orientation and against it the growth tendency is strengthened can be determined. If possible, all autonomous impulses that express something independent and of one's own in thinking, feeling and acting, and signal a potential independence, must be repressed. First and foremost, all of one's own powers that could be in competition with authority must be mentioned here. One's own thoughts, convictions, and ideas, especially if they question the authority's claim to dominance in business, in politics, in religion, in culture, in society, in the state, and so on. One's own will, which is usually accompanied by a questioning of the demand of obedience, must be muzzled to a large extent. He who cannot hear must feel and, of course, be punished. Simply taking liberties is usually punished, regardless of whether anyone has been harmed. What is crucial is here disobedience and the potential rebellion against the authority and the authoritarian rules. All forms of self-determination are dangerous, regardless of whether this refers to family or professional role attributions or religious rituals, the gender question or sexual preferences, or political expression or artistic freedoms. Self-determination is understood as rebellion against the grace, the wisdom, the care and superiority of authority, which always knows better what is good for those dependent on it. For many, the emotional situation of the authoritarian character outlined here is more in a past than in a present. Where it is no longer feelable, this has mainly to do with the fact that other forms of economic production and socialization no longer need the repression of their own autonomous powers, and a new social character orientation became dominant, namely, in most of the cases, the marketing orientation.